put your questions in chat so she can follow along, and I will ask Ariane of your questions. So Ariane, talk to us about closing day today and how it's kind of crazy.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. So nice to see a lot of faces. I'm Ariane O'Donnell, attorney in the Stamford office. I put my contact information in the chat for anyone who'd like to ask me any questions, because there are always a lot of questions with these closings. It's just been a little interesting lately. And so today I'm going to talk about closing delays. Sadly, there's been some, I don't know if, what may necessarily be happening, but I will say, not with Westport Mortgage. We have a closing together, and it's closing quickly, on time, and everything. They're great to work with. So just to give a couple examples of things that have been happening, we have one client who's making a out-of-state move, and she is not going to be able to close on the closing date itself, needs a couple extra days. So I wanted to take this time to mention that in attorney contracts that are prepared, there is a standard clause for a 5-day free period where a seller or buyer can delay the closing without any penalty at all. And this is important because it has been coming into play lately. And in a standard real estate contract, there is no provision for any penalty. So what happens is, in the standard real estate contract, if there's a delay in closing, it's kind of what is reasonable, and reasonable hasn't, of course, been necessarily legally defined, but it's what's reasonable before a delaying party can be considered in default. In a real estate contract, it says that you have 5 business days in which to delay the closing. After that, there's a per diem penalty, which is based on a 1/30th amount of 1% of the sale price, and that is a per diem amount that could be quite hefty. So it is important to know that, because it is now coming up as an issue in pretty much about 3 closings. So we have that seller who is able to delay the closing, and there's nothing the buyer can do about it. We have another client who's a buyer, and I'm having some tenant problems lately. These tenants are just not getting out when they're supposed to. On 2 files, the tenants have delayed their move out date, and it has caused a domino effect for everybody else. So that has been a problem. And in one situation, these buyers are going to have some problems because they're supposed to be out of their place. But again, this 5 business day penalty free period is really an issue. So it's something to, I'm sorry, one last case is a client was supposed to sell her house, and the buyers had some problems and can't sell. So therefore, she's not able to buy because she needs to have that cleared up with her current mortgage. So now she has entered into a per diem penalty stage because of that delay. Now, we're turning it around. I'm not handling the sale of her home, but we're turning around and saying to her seller's attorney, ask for per diem penalties on that one as part of the extension request, so that at least it gets covered for her as much as possible. So there's been a few interesting time periods. This month has been a little interesting, I guess, scary, like Halloween, perfect, right? So
what can we do to try to safeguard against some of these things, Ariane?
Well, sometimes it's really hard because it's there's so many different circumstances that can happen. One thing would be to prepare your clients. One client in particular was bemoaning to me, well, why didn't I know about this in my binder? I said, well, that's not a typical thing that's covered in the binder. It's because, also it could be a standard real estate contract. It could be a regular attorney's contract. That isn't something that is necessarily covered there, but she was upset that her broker didn't tell her that. And I don't think that, she did anything wrong, but maybe it would be a good thing to mention that to your clients, that these are possibilities. So to kind of prepare for a buffer of time before and after a closing, just in case
Yeah.
something happens.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, hearing about several delayed closings, not necessarily cancellations, but delayed closings. And I'll say this, guys, I mean, we were just talking about this on our morning huddle with the entire staff. We need to know about them. Don't just, know that you're dealing with, you have to deal with your clients, of course, but you got to let us know. You have to let us know so the MCAs know exactly what's going on with these transactions. And whether we're invoicing, we're not invoicing, the invoice is changing. I mean, there's all kinds of things, repercussions of this domino effect, right? We need to know about it. So please, I just asked Steve Gendel, actually our regional tech director, you can make a change in the system in opportunities and commissions about a change in a closing date. So please go in and do that. Don't assume that we know when you have this delay, or reach out to Deb, reach out to Sam and let them know personally, directly, even in a text, that it's changed. That'd be really helpful on our end. Ariane, any questions for Ariane about closing day and what we could do to help with your possible delays and roadblocks? I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Anybody want to speak up? Feel free. I know you're all having some of these delays. It's happened.
Well, while I can mention one other small thing is, some closing things to think about to advise your clients, and that's to let them know about certain things that they need to do. Obviously, the walkthrough is an important thing. And I've mentioned one other time to make sure that the walkthrough is close to the closing date so that there's no gap between, when the people see the place, the buyers see the place, and when they close, because you don't want anything to happen in between. And also just to let your clients know about utilities as well, and to change them over, to let you know, attorneys take care of public water and public sewer. That's our responsibility to make sure that that gets transferred over into the other, into the buyer's names. The seller's attorney takes care of that. So just to let you know, they don't have to take care of that, but they should, do all the other utilities. And they should get oil set up as well. They can use the same company that exists. There will be a reading and adjustment done at closing. They don't have to use that company, but sometimes it's just easier to just keep going.
Yeah, or delayed closing for an oil read is a real special thing. I remember that happening to me once. Kind of crazy. Also, I have commented, I have seen, I think, one or two situations where agents were not going on a final walkthrough. Good grief. Make sure you're going and attending your final walkthrough with your clients. It's a must do. All right, I think that's it, Ariane. I don't see any questions. I want to be mindful of everybody's time. So thank you for being with us.
I have a question.
Okay.
What would happen when we have a clear to close? We were representing the buyers and the seller didn't want to sell at the time. And we had a standard contract.
Okay, so you have a standard contract and you had a clear to close and you're ready to go to closing, and then the seller pulled out on a
Yes,
standard contract.
yes.
It's a little bit harder with sellers because what was the reason the seller pulled out? Was there just change of heart, or was there a title problem, or was there?
Well, we didn't know exactly. It was like apparently it was some sort of health issues with one of the seller, but that was the reason. But we don't think it was true.
So the one thing that the buyer can do when there's a default by a seller is something called specific performance. However, that is a court action. So if the buyer wanted to go ahead and force the seller to sell the property to them, then that's the action that they have to do. Unfortunately, there's not as much of a strong hold against sellers backing out as there are buyers backing out. So a buyer backing out can lose their deposit, but a seller, it's harder. But the seller should absolutely reimburse the buyer for everything that they have expended at that time. And if they have to get a hotel room, or rental, or they're homeless or something, that they should, demand all of that money.
And one more question: Can if the buyers would like to pursue and take the sellers to court, can forgot the question. Can that be the attorney's fees can be included with that suit?
Yes, the attorney's fees should be included in that they have to, the contract, standard contract and the attorney contracts always have that the winning party will be responsible for attorney's fees.
Very well, thank you.
Good
Hey,
luck.
Steve, I have a question. Oh,
Okay,
hi, it's Raquel. I have a question.
sure, go ahead.
Hello.
What if you received a clear to close from your mortgage company, and you're scheduled to close, I don't know, 5 days out, and then a day or so before closing, your mortgage lender says, underwriting reviewed it again one more time, and they are not, you're not approved to close. They're not going to give you the loan. What happens to a buyer at that point?
That's an issue. And
Big issue.
I'm gonna be honest. The buyer's deposit is on the line. It depends if the mortgage contingency was extended. But if it got a clear to close, most likely the mortgage contingency was waived.
Correct.
And yeah, I mean, I truly would love to have the mortgage contingency be up to 10 minutes before the closing. It's really
Right.
unfortunate, but unfortunately we can't have it that way. So the buyer's deposit is on the line. So yes, I would, someone said, call Westport Mortgage immediately, there may be the penalties that come into play, depending if you have the standard contract or the attorney's fees contract, but it doesn't mean that they're in default yet. They just may have a delay in time. Get another lender, find out what happened, what occurred, because maybe they could save it by closing later, which is exactly what I'm having with, clients, buyers, but, just so that
So-
they can save the deposit.
So if the current lender says they definitely can't do it, then you have to start over with a new lender, which means you're going to incur that per diem rate until you close. Is that usually the path that happens?
You could try and ask for an extension of the closing date, but it's not an automatic grant. That's what we tried to do on this other deal where my clients' buyers are having problems with their mortgage. So they can try and do that. They can also, what is the problem? Like, what happened? Was it a loss of income issue? Maybe they can get a co-borrower on their current loan or something.
Guys, I'm also going to recommend, Raquel, why don't you call Ariane and talk through this? I think she can give you
Yes.
some real good advice, and you may want to call Paul Leibowitz too, and see if there can be a situation where you can shift over to a different lender. And Paul,
Good idea, Rick.
All right.
Good idea,
Can you
Steve.
I don't know what's Ariane's contact info, so if you could put in the
It's
chat.
in the
It's
chat,
in the
but
chat. It's in the
Okay,
chat.
it is.
yeah.
Okay, great.
All right, guys.
Thank
Good luck with everything.
you.
Thank you. Good luck. And
All right, guys,
nice
see
meeting
ya.
everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Ariane.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.